friends, Jessica Stallings Holder here, and I am so excited to introduce you to one of my besties today. His name is Tony Moore, and he's a culture architect. Now, Tony and I met about 5 years ago in Florida. We were both keynoting with our friends at Big Bend Sherm and became instant friends. Throughout our journey, we've been learning and sharing together, and we've even shared the stage together. But I'll let Tony tell you a little bit about that. Hey, so welcome, Tony Moore. And Tony, I've got to start by asking you, what on earth is a culture architect?
Great question. And so, first of all, let me just tell you, it's so great to be here with you. I'm so excited that I've been able to not only be a part of your journey, but watch you on your journey and see the success that you're having. So it's an honor to spend some time with you this morning. So culture architect. So essentially what a culture architect is it would be anyone who is helping an organization design their culture. So if you think about an actual architect, the architect does the design work, but someone else does the building. And so my job is to meet with clients, meet with leadership teams, help them identify what type of culture they'd like to have, and then walk them through that design process while serving as a coach to them as they actually build the culture that they're looking for.
And I love that, right? Because sometimes, Tony, we let cultures happen by default
yes,
rather than intentional design. And
yes.
What are the benefits of being intentional?
Say that again. I missed the last part of that.
Yeah, tell me the difference of that you can make when you actually create a culture.
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So there's, it's interesting. There is actually a Harvard Business Review article that I was reading on culture. And one of the things it said is that most executives understand the value of culture, but then it went on to say, but most let culture happen. They manage it by their intuition. And so what I found is that if culture is that important, which we know that it is, it should be given the same level of attention, the same level of deliberate effort as you do for your financial statements, as you do for any other thing that you're doing in the organization. So the outcomes that you can get far exceed those than you get accidentally. Just like it's the difference between deciding you want to take a trip. I live in Clearwater, Florida. So it's the difference between deciding you want to take a trip to Jacksonville and actually knowing what Jacksonville looks like. And as opposed to saying, I want to go to Jacksonville, but I have no idea what Jacksonville looks like. So I'm just going to drive until I find a place that looks like Jacksonville. You might luck up on it and end up in Jacksonville, but you might end up in Miami also. And so the cool thing about being intentional is that you have decided what kind of outcome you're looking for. You can measure that. You've defined it. Your employees have a target they're shooting for. So it makes all the difference in the world. It gives clarity to something that is typically seen as pretty squishy and without any real substance to it. And in this way, we've given some substance to what you're trying to create.
Yeah, so we're going to dig into that substance today, because what I found as I listened to leaders across the country is that many of them desire that, Tony, that very intentional culture that can be measured and engaging of all people. But how on earth do you do it? So what I'd love to do is pose to you today maybe a common challenge that my clients face. And I'd love for you to maybe walk us through how we could be intentional.
Okay.
So in my world, I study generational trends. And based on the times and contexts we grow up in, sometimes that impacts what we're looking for in the workplace. So for example, we may see some generations who would prefer to meet face-to-face, and others who may just love to be remote. We may have some within a team that want to text as their primary communication channel. Others would prefer to email, Slack, instant message, or meet in person. So what could a leader do if they have a team of multi-generations to create a place where all ages and stages can have a seat at the table, that their voice can heard, and ultimately that all people can thrive? Because I believe when we have that kind of mix, it can really begin to drive innovation.
Yes.
So what would we do, Tony, with a multi-generational team?
Well, it's interesting that provides a leader so many opportunities because you're going to get, plenty of research out there tells you that the more voices we can get, the more thoughts and opinions around a subject, the better the team is going to operate. in the long run is going to give you. You're still making the decision, but you're getting data and information from a variety of sources and a variety of perspectives, which is going to help shape the outcome. So first and foremost, I think I would just say it provides such a great opportunity for the team, the fact that they have multi-generations at the table with them.
Can I say a woot woot right there?
Absolutely. And I'll say that's cool.
What should we tell them about LL Cool and Jay?
Well, yeah, you should do that because you are the creator of that.
I'm just gonna have to pause and time out. And so when Tony and I were speaking, I mean, we had a blast, but we come in with two totally different styles. So actually all we're talking about today, Tony, I totally represent. So I just try being a speaker with Tony Moore. He's so funny and so cool and just has this thing. And so when he speaks, he always asks the audiences, is that cool? And everyone says, yeah, that's cool. But that's me. I'm a little bit more by the book and polished. And so I said, you know, you're LL Cool and I'm just Jay. So Jay, we have a ton of fun, don't we?
Oh, indeed. I love that. Absolutely love that.
Let me just now go back to LL Cool.
Yes.
What would that model be, or that framework to really bring together this multi-generational team?
Yeah. So there's a real push. There's a real push from my perspective for us to define the outcome that we're looking for. So, Stephen Covey talks about begin with the end in mind. This when it comes to building culture, that's absolutely what you want to do. So if the issue is how do we get the best out of a multi-generational team, then the question we need to ask is, how would we know if we were getting the best out of a multi-generational team? What would we see? What would be the evidence that we're getting the best out of a multi-generational team? And I wouldn't do that as the leader. We would do that as a collective group. So together we would define the outcomes that we're looking for that would tell us that we have a multi-generational team. So let's say, as an example, someone said, well, one of those things would be that all voices would be heard. So that would be evidence that is occurring. Well, you and I both know that my definition of all voices being heard and your definition of all voices being heard are probably not the same. So after deciding that all voices being heard is going to be a part of our culture, is going to be evidence that we are leveraging a multi-generational team, then we have to decide what are the behaviors that would demonstrate that all voices were being heard. So I might even ask every person to say, I would know that my voice was being heard if blank were happening. So they could just, as an example, and so now I've got a group of, let's say, 6 or 8 people who've all filled in that blank with 1 to 3 things that would tell us that. And then we bring all that information together and we begin to talk about that. Then I would give each person an opportunity to not only share their 3, but also to share why those 3 would be important. And through that process of sharing, what I find is that you find there are some common themes that begin to emerge. And that in many cases, even when the generations are different, what they're looking for is the same thing. It's just their approach to it is different. So I gain some understanding of the way they see it, and they gain some understanding of the way I see it. And then we begin to move into the part of the process that focuses on then what are we going to agree upon we're going to do as a team, which means that all of us have to recognize that I'm not going to get everything that I want in this culture, and you're not going to get everything you want, but we're working together for something that's bigger than us. And so therefore we're going to create something that adds value to everyone at the table. So we would start by defining the outcome that we're looking for. We would then move into what are the behaviors that would demonstrate that whatever that outcome is that we're looking for. So we would know that all voices are being heard. How would we demonstrate that? What are the behaviors that we can all agree upon that would demonstrate that that's what we're doing? Then we move into what are the more difficult parts of the system. And that is, what is the gap between what we say we want and what we actually have? Because the first 2 steps are really aspirational in nature. So it's what I'd like to have. But wherein lies the gap between what we have and what we'd like to have? And that's a difficult piece of the puzzle because it requires us to be really, really honest with each other and really, really honest with ourselves. And so as we identify what those gaps are, we then have to diagnose that disconnect, right? So now I need to diagnose that disconnect. Is that a system issue? Is that a people issue? Is it, where's the disconnect coming from? And what we encourage people to do in this process is to look not only as where are the challenges where are the gaps we have as a team, but what are the individual contributions I'm making to that gap? So there's a lot of self-reflection involved in the process of looking at, if we're going to have a culture like this, what do I have to do differently? Not what does my leader need to do differently, not as what does my team need to do differently. What am I willing to commit to doing differently to get this outcome that we've all agreed is very, very important for us? And then on the other side of that, so then once we've walked through that part of the process, then we're going to talk about what are the things that we can do to truly embed this into our team. So in my book, I talk about a lot of different activities that you can go through over the course of a year or two. But at the end of the day, it's about incorporating these new values and these new behaviors into our team. It's about defining how are we going to deal with it when someone violates it. So this is what you've agreed to do, but this is what you're doing. And so how are we going to handle that as a team? Because I will tell you this, the best teams I've ever been a part of are those teams that hold each other accountable, and it doesn't require the leader to do it. It's because it's ours. It's why my son would say to my daughter, you can't do that because mom and dad won't like you doing that. And just because they're not here doesn't mean it's okay for you to not do that, for you to go to do something that they would disagree with. So there's a sense in a family that we're going to hold each other accountable to the rules of the household. And that's what we're creating in this organization. Can you hear that? Can you hear the lawnmower in mine right now?
No lawnmower, but I got one going.
Okay, cool. I'm going to pull this door up just a little bit, just in case.
I love it. We got lawnmowers and dogs.
Oh, yeah. So, yes, for sure. Yeah, being home right now means there's a lot of yard work that's actually getting done. So, but what we're trying to create are a set of rules of engagement that define the behavior of the team. And the cool thing about those rules of engagement is that it makes some of those difficult conversations a little bit easier. It's easier because Jessica has committed to doing ABC, and I've observed Jessica not doing ABC. So now we can actually have a conversation about a commitment that you made that I don't see that you're not following through on, as opposed to we haven't defined it. And so now I'm saying, well, you're not demonstrating the level of commitment that I'm expecting. Well, what level of commitment are you expecting? Because I think I'm demonstrating a lot of commitment. Right. So let's define what it is that we're looking for. And then that gives us a context in which to have those tough conversations. I had a team, I talk about them in my book, as I always refer to them as my favorite team of all time. And it wasn't just because they were super, super talented, because they were super talented. But I think it was a perfect storm. I was at a place in my career where I knew what my true strengths were, and I knew what all of my, not all of, but I had a good handle on those things that the areas where I'm really challenged. I was also at a point in my career where I was very comfortable with people around me who were way better than me. And so there was a perfect storm kind of coming together of a group of people who needed a leader like me and a leader who needed a team like them. But we went through this process that I call our 4D process. And we defined, ultimately, the end result is that we have this set of rules of engagement. And we created a set of rules of engagement that were both relative to our internal behavior in terms of how we were going to operate with one another. So what were our values as a team and what behaviors would demonstrate those values? And then we also set them up for our customers. Now, this was an HR department, so our customers were our employees. And so I'll give you a real quick example of how they just became such the greatest team. So one of the exercises we went through is I asked them to think about this question. If we were to survey our customers a year from now, what are the kinds of words and phrases we would want them to use to describe us? So what would we want them to say about us, right? So you got all this stuff up on the whiteboard or flip chart paper, all these different words and phrases. And we began to narrow that down to 2 or 3 that we thought these are the most important ones in light of where we are today as a team. So one of those, as an example, one of those is that we wanted to be seen as responsive. We're an HR department. People are reaching out to us. We want our customers to see us as responsive. So the next question is, if we were going to be perceived as being responsive, what behaviors would we have to engage in order to be perceived as being responsive? So this team came up with some timelines around how quickly we respond to email, They came up with some timelines around how quickly we respond to phone conversations. They came up with some rules around if you're not able to respond in the allotted time, what you're supposed to do. And so now all of a sudden we have people who are saying, well, if you can't get back to someone within 24 hours, you're going to let someone else know on the team. And we've all agreed you'll respond on my behalf, or you're going to let that person know you can't get to them until tomorrow. But they set up some rules around think of it as some guideposts to help us on this journey toward being responsive. Now, here's where it gets real interesting, is that I remember at some point, we're a couple of years into this, and I remember at some point, two of my team members came in and wanted to talk with me. And I'm going to use you as the example, Jessica, but they came in and said, hey, we need to talk to you about something going on with Jessica. I said, okay, well, and they know me. My first question is, so do we need to call Jessica in here? Because I don't want to talk about Jessica without Jessica sitting here. Right. So they go, no. Yeah, absolutely. So they said, no, I don't think so. Let us talk to you first, and then we can decide how to proceed. And so what they told me was that they were getting complaints from some of the managers that she was supporting, that she wasn't getting back to them, that they felt like they were having to call multiple times and send multiple messages to get in touch with her. And so again, my first question is, have you spoken to Jessica about it? They said, yes. Not only have we spoken to her, we've let her know that we're willing to take some of her load when she gets backed up, because we all get backed up. But basically what we told her is, remember, we all agreed that if you couldn't do it, you would tell someone. And they said, we've already had that conversation with her, and now it's happened again. And so that's why we're coming to you. So great team, because they're holding each other accountable to what they agreed to do. And now they're telling me to say, hey, she's not listening to us, so maybe she'll listen to you. That's an example of how that intentionality around building a culture, creating those rules of engagement, allow us to have a much better conversation.
Oh, and I mean, I just think of that example, how much conflict was eliminated just by the process.
Yes.
I love, Tony, that you start with defining it. In my world of intergenerational relations, I've been training recently. We're talking about defining moments of a generation, Tony. And we had a baby boomer who was really excited when she said, moonwalk. Well, before she could finish, a really excited 30-something said, moonwalk, I love that dance, right? Neil Armstrong, the other
yes.
accent, both know a thing or two about the moonwalk. Neither one is wrong. But if we're around in the halls talking about the moonwalk,
yes,
so many different perceptions of what that means. Now, a common example, I want to try to use your process as I understand it to a common thing I see in generations is over how we would define work ethic. And a lot of companies say this is a big value of ours. We work hard here at our company. Well, when we look across generational lines, for many of our elders, when they grew up in a time period where they had 80 million peers, so to get a job and a position of leadership, they had to show up, outperform their peers. They were in the office early, staying late. So sometimes work ethic or hard work for them is associated with kind of being in a physical place.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
The emerging generations talk about hard work. It has to do with an outcome. It doesn't matter where you do it, how quickly you do it. So I'm seeing a lot like generational teams, multi-generational teams saying we work hard, but not them. And looking at, oh yeah, we are. Look at this outcome we produced. And the others saying, yeah, we are. Look, we're here at this much time and we're working hard. So if we were to say, if a team were to say, strong work ethic is a core value of ours. That's how we want our multi-generational team to be known for and our core value, then we would define together, right? This is what work ethic means to me. And then to us, once you find those commonalities, this is the way we're going to demonstrate hard work to one another. And by the way, behaviors, I think there's a lot of confusion there, but behaviors are things you do or not do, right? They're
absolutely.
Right? Okay, so this is how we're going to demonstrate hard work to one another. And here's how we're going to nurture this in the DNA of our team. And here's how we're going to defend it.
Yes.
That unit is in alignment. Man, think of conflict that's going to be mitigated and think of the opportunity for innovation that culture is going to create the soil for.
Absolutely. Oh, that's a great example, because at the end of the day, what you've done as a team is you've redefined work ethic for your team. Just like we would do it if your family and my family were going to move in together, we would have to define some things. You and I would probably use similar words to describe our families, but the way it's executed on a day-to-day basis would be vastly different. But if we're going to live under the same roof, we need to have the same definition of how it's going to play out on a day-to-day basis, which means we'll do some of what you do and some of what I do, but we'll come together and say, but we'll do it as a family this way.
Yes.
You know? Yeah.
I love
Yes.
that.
Yes.
One final question is, you mentioned in our intro that this is all measurable. How do you measure culture?
Yeah. Well, I think that the challenge in measuring culture is that what you're measuring is impact. So you've defined some outcomes that you're looking for that would tell you if you have. So let me back up for a second. So in addition to saying what would a multi-generational team look like if it was working well, the question is, what would they be producing? To your outcomes example, what would you see that would be happening, not just from a behavioral standpoint, but if the culture doesn't positively affect the bottom line, then why are we in business, right? So what are those bottom line results that we want to look for? So depending on the team, are we looking for changes in customer service scores? Are we looking for changes in employee engagement scores? Some of the very things that you're already measuring, those things should be improving as a result of this team working together more effectively. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I said to that team, I was just telling you about that great team that I love those guys, and many of them we still stay in touch. They've gone on to be directors and we still stay in touch. But one of the things that I challenged them on was one of the questions I asked them at the very beginning was, if I could remove any obstacle from your pathway today that you would immediately become more successful, what is it? What is that obstacle that you remove? So there are two questions. There was that one. The other one was, if you had been appointed to my position instead of me, what three things would you focus on first? So what were the things that if you were the new chief human resource officer, you would do it, right? So I got all this great data from them, and I met individually with every person and went over these questions with them. There were some common themes, and there were some things that were vastly different. One of the things that was very, very clear was that there was a sense that all of their challenges were happening outside of our office. So what I would focus on is, we don't get what we need from the finance department in a timely fashion, or we don't. So if you could fix that issue, I would be in a better place, all which is true. There was nothing, believe me, nothing they said there was an internal issue at all. So you would have thought this was the best team in the world, because the only reason we're not successful is because of those people out there. And if they did what they were supposed to do, I would be at a better place. So here was my challenge to the team. I had a CEO, actually he was the CEO of this company also, who was a good friend of mine. And he told me years and years ago, when we were doing our first organizational turnaround, he said, if you want to change the world, start where you are and work your way out. So my challenge to the team was this.
One more time.
Say it again.
Say that one more time.
Yes. If you want to change the world, start where you are and work your way out. And it was this powerful, transformative quote that he said to me years ago when we were doing a turnaround. And this is what I did with this team. I said, so here's our challenge. Instead of us focusing on how to fix the rest of the organization, because we're going to address those things, what if we become the kind of team that we want to see them become? What if we were the example? What if we were the team that everybody was so jealous of? They're like, I don't know what y'all do down there, but I want to be on that team, because that team is knocking it out of the park from performance. They get along with each other. And that's what we set about on this course, to become a team of envy. Let's be the example to everybody else. Let's show them how it's supposed to be done. And then we can go out and say, if you make these kinds of changes on your team, you can see the kind of change that we have. Now, let me wrap this up with a funny little story related to that. So I had a lady from our finance department. She said, Tony, every time I come past your office, you guys are always in there laughing and cutting up. And she said, if you come in there, there's always potlucks going on and all of that. And so next thing I know, her department was scheduling a potluck, right? And so I said to her, I said to her, Nicole, I said, I think that's great you're doing a potluck, but the potluck grew out of the culture. The potluck didn't create the culture. See, we're getting along, so we want to share a meal together. We don't share a meal to learn how to get along. We learned how to get along, and out of that came this desire to eat together, to not go out to lunch. Let's just eat here. Let's laugh. Let's joke. And so it's not the massage chair that makes the culture. Because even your worst employees like massages, right? I mean, they would, you know what I'm saying? They would be standing in line waiting for their massage just like everybody else.
Right.
But all those things that you do should be reflective of the values and the behaviors that you exhibit.
Absolutely. So it's almost like we invert a lot of the traditional models. Like, I work with next generation recruiting strategies. So often I hear, Tony, well, we just need to get a ping pong table.
Yes.
Or, a foosball table.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Ping pong is not going to solve your problems.
No.
That being said, anybody want to play? But it's kind of starting back. And that's why I so appreciate your process, your model. I've watched you do it. I've watched it evolve. I've seen the results, and I couldn't be more proud. And I just want to remind companies how important it is to have a problem that we're trying to solve. I work with so many people that want to measure learning and see the ROI as I encourage us all that we should. If we're going to invest in learning and training, we've got to know, is it moving the needle? But to do that, we have to understand where some of our challenges are. And culture is a huge piece really connected to that. So I encourage clients, as we are measuring culture, we're looking at retention and recruiting and all of the different areas that we measure in our heat maps. I'm always encouraging them, Tony, too, to slice and dice by age or generation, because it's an indicator of some areas we may be having trouble with. So maybe we'll have to do another session on measuring, but I absolutely that you're doing that with clients.
Yes.
So any other words of encouragement if there's a leader watching this today who's just frustrated, they got a lot on their plate. The people side can be challenging. What encouragement would you leave them with as they begin to think about this process?
Yeah, so I would say to you, first and foremost, something that I say in one of my keynotes, and that's that a smooth sea never made a skillful sailor. And so you become a more effective leader by leading during difficult times. That's a part of it. I would also encourage you to speak with someone, because I think it's important to step away from that and talk to someone who's not involved in the day-to-day, not involved in the challenges that you're facing, because you get all of us as leaders. I spent 25 years as an executive, and you get tunnel vision. And so I think finding someone that you could talk to about what your challenges are and help you sort through. Because what I have found is that oftentimes what looks like 10 things may only be 2. It just looks like 10 to you because you're in the middle of it, but you need someone to help you create some clarity. Shameless plug, would sure love for you to buy my book. Go give that a shot, because it is I wrote it for the person who wants to do exactly what you're talking about. Like, I've got an issue, and it doesn't mean that things are bad. It just means I want to take it to another level. And so it is a how-to manual with worksheets, and there's things on my website that you can download after you've purchased a book. So I would encourage you to do that as a good starting point. And then I would say this last thing, and my business partner will kill me for saying this, but anyone who watches this podcast, who then reaches out to me via email or LinkedIn and says, "Hey, I was listening to your podcast with Jessica, and I would like to take advantage of your offer. Here's the offer." I'd be glad to spend 15 to 20 minutes with you at no charge, and just you talk with your problem, and I'll tell you what my thoughts are on it. And I won't charge any of your listeners for that. So
I love that. And I'm going to shamelessly plug, that was if I did nothing else. I got to tell you, my friends, Tony's book literally walks you through. I have used it so many times. I used it with the teams that I consult. We're sitting there, literally with this book step by step. Yeah. It's Culture in 4D.
Yes.
Where can they find your book?
So it is, most people are purchasing it on Amazon, but it is on Amazon. It's also in Barnes & Noble has it, and Books A Million is another one that has it. If there's bulk orders, they can reach out to us directly and get a little better pricing that way. But otherwise, those are your best places to go.
And website, TonyMooreSpeaks.com?
Yes, TonyMooreSpeaks.com. Yes.
Okay. And Tony delivers keynotes, virtual or in person. He does training virtual or in person. Like me, we're pivoting and it's actually a real pleasure to pivot together. Tony and I have been just resetting and relooking at how we best serve our clients in these times. And we're trying, we're failing, we're getting the dirt out of our teeth.
Yes.
But it sure is a pleasure to have awesome people to rise with. So Tony, thank you for being on the journey with me. And we'll make sure to put links to Tony's work and business. And I'll tell you what, an experience with him is one of the best that you'll ever have. So
thank you.
hey, so LL Cool, anything else?
No, I think that's it. Thank you for having me, Jay. Just Jay.
And Jay,
Just Jay.
we may have to do another one because this was so awesome. So
I
thank you,
agree.
friend. All right.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay. See you.
Bye bye.